Hi, welcome to the Capital Coffee Connection podcast. And I'm Liz, and I am having virtual coffee today with Sal Litvak, who I have to tell you, I have been a little bit like geeking out because I love to do my research on who I'm meeting with, leaders. Most of my podcasts have been with political leaders. But one of the things that I kind of realized is that we also have so many leaders, and people are looking for leaders right now. People are looking for people that are going to make them feel heard, but also people that are going to make them smile and make them feel worthwhile. And I think you're a Renaissance man. You have done so many amazing things, and we're going to talk about them. But I just want to say welcome and thank you for joining me. And I look forward to our conversation.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here, Liz. And I would say right back at you. You've done a lot of different things, and your work is so important, especially since October 7th.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I was thinking about like we have so much in common. I don't tell jokes quite as well as you do, but I thought about my father so much because a lot of the jokes that you tell in your book, "Let My People Laugh," were jokes and things that my father used to tell, and he was really good at it. So I thought about that as I was reading, and one of the other things I just thought about was like, as Jewish people, our resilience and our ability to just keep going, but also just to find humor and to find lightness, but also to find hope. And so I think that's like how I'd like to start this because one of the things about you is that you have done so much in the creative world, but you've also done so much in the spiritual world. And so we're going to talk about that, but I want to go back to your beginning. You come from this family that has had so much. Your family fled the pogroms, your family survived the Holocaust, and then you came to America. You were born in Santiago, Chile. You came to America as a little boy. Tell us what it was like to be an immigrant child with that's a lot of weight on the shoulders of a child.
I was 5 when we arrived in this country. My parents always had this tremendous emphasis on education because, above all, that's portable, right?
Yeah.
You always have to have a suitcase, you got to have some money, and then you never know when you're going to have to go and start over. And it's just a story that the Jews, have had to repeat so many times, going to a new place and starting over. So yeah, my mother, Hungarian survivor, my grandmother carried her as an infant through a concentration camp. Absolute miracle story. My grandfather murdered in a different camp. On my father's side, led the pogroms of Ukraine, 1905. Both families ended up in Chile. We don't know why. Some relative went there and others followed. And then in 1970, when Chile elected a communist president, Salvador Allende, the Hungarians who had survived the war and then endured the Soviets afterward said, yeah, we've seen this story before and it's time to go. And that's how we ended up in the United States. And yeah, my parents said, what does success look like in America? So they said to me, you're going to go to Harvard and be a doctor. And since I was 5, I said, I was 5. Very, not an uncommon Jewish sentiment.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, sounds good to me. And that was always the plan. And thank God we had this emphasis on education in the family, and I was able to do well in school. And it was not just I got into Harvard; it's like we got into Harvard. The whole family got into Harvard. And I'll tell you, that's something I used to not talk about. Sounds snotty. I went to Harvard, but these days it's become somewhat of a badge of shame. So I admit it more freely. But I was very grateful to go. There was a wonderful experience, and I was not a religious Jew then. I did have a bar mitzvah when I was a kid. My grandmother always lit candles,
Yeah.
and we had a glass of wine and a challah by Friday night dinner, and we were a family that ate dinners together. Not all my friends in America did that, but I guess in that sense we were more European or South American. And and then when I got to Harvard, that a few things happened. One was I took a class. I was an English major, and I took a class. The Bible is literature, and so we read the Bible cover to cover, and there were certainly lots of stories, difficult stories that we didn't cover in Hebrew school. and that I was fascinated by, and did not yet have a rabbi in my life to discuss them with. But I certainly had a curiosity. I was always very interested in God. Um, Sadly, the Judaism I was exposed to when I was young, kind of this big bar mitzvah mill type of synagogue, was not very spiritual. It wasn't really about God. It was more about, let's call it ethical monotheism.
Right.
Uh, and so I was seeking, not in other religions, but other practices, meditation, endurance sports, martial arts, drumming, Grateful Dead shows. And then things really changed for me a little bit later in life when I had already come to Los Angeles to go to UCLA Film School. And then my mom said, come home. It was my grandmother was at the end of her journey. She was 88, and we were very close. Like I said, she lost her husband, my grandfather, in the war. And she was very happy for all the Jews that remarried, who lost spouses and remarried after the war and got busy repopulating the world with Jews after the Holocaust. But for her, there was only her Imre. Her name was Magda, and he was Imre, her Beshet. And this was one of those love stories for the ages.
Yeah.
And so his pictures were in our house, and it was just something we knew about her, that she was waiting to be reunited with him in the next world.
Wow.
And she sounds like a saint, and she was, but she was hilarious. We had so much fun, and her Hungarian cooking was such an important part of our lives. And so I came home, and we were all by her bedside, and I watched her take her last breath, and we were crying and weeping, but something pulled my attention away from her face into the middle of the room, and it was like the air shimmered and something opened. And I was looking through this opening, and I saw her moving away from me and toward someone.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, it was my grandfather that I recognized from the photographs. And I thought, this is the moment she's been waiting for 53 years. I can't believe I'm seeing this. And the weird thing was, she didn't want to go. Why does she want to go? And then I got it. She was embarrassed. He was this young, handsome man she last saw in 1943, and he felt like an old lady. And he took her hands and pulled her to him, and they embraced. It got brighter. Then she was young again. And there was this unbelievable love drenched moment. And then it got really bright, and then they were gone. And I was there like, my jaw hanging open. Couldn't believe that with her last moments in this world, I'd been granted this view, of the entrance, let's say, to the next world.
Wow.
And it changed my life. When I got back to LA, I wanted to honor her, and I went to a synagogue, and thank God the rabbi that day was really inspiring and a great teacher. And then I started learning and getting hooked in. And every rabbi I ever took a class from, or any kind of teaching, would mention the Talmud. And I was very curious about the Talmud, but I didn't go to yeshiva, and I don't have the background. I didn't really know what it was. When I would go to a Judaica store to, get a book or a kippah or tzitzis or something in my growing Jewish observance, I would see the Talmud. Now, I don't know if you're old enough, Liz, you're a very young woman, but if you remember the Encyclopedia Britannica from
Yeah.
our youth, right? The wisdom of humanity, 23 volumes, big burgundy volumes. So
I
the
still
top,
I still have my mother's, so please, yeah.
wonderful. And, the Talmud, the wisdom of the Jews, 73 volumes, just so big, so vast. And I just, I didn't go to yeshiva. I wouldn't know where to begin, how to access that. I don't even know if I'm allowed. At that point, I was younger. I wasn't yet 40. I heard Kabbalah, you're supposed to be 40. Maybe the Talmud, you have to be 40, or you have to be a rabbi. Who knows? I guess it's not for me. But I was very curious. And so every time I'd go to that store, I'd kind of think about it and say, well, I'm going to yeshiva. I guess it's not for me. Get intimidated, walk away, repeat probably a dozen times.
Right.
And then 2005, I was in that store, looked at those books again, and start to walk away. And I said, these are ridiculous. They're just books. I was an English major at Harvard, for goodness sake. Nina and I are readers, writers, or a writing team. I mean, our house is full of books. I'm just going to get book one and see what it's like. I got book one of the Talmud. I took it to the register, and the kid at the counter said, "Oh, you're doing Daf Yomi." So I said, "What's Daf Yomi?" And I don't know if your listeners, you could describe what I'm doing. This is what he did to me.
He took his glasses down and he stared at you.
Over glasses down to the tip of his nose and stared at me over them as if to say, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
And I thought, man, Daf Yomi must be a code. If you don't know the code, you're not allowed to read these books. Now he's got to get rid of me without embarrassing me. So
You know,
awkward.
I'll just say one thing that's like it's like there's an intimidation sometimes
Yes.
when it comes to
Yes.
religion or learning something, and you feel like I'm already supposed to know it. But I think the beauty of what you're saying and for people to listen is like you also everyone thinks, oh, he's got it. He's this guy. And at that moment you didn't have it. You were just like, I don't get I'm so anxious about what I'm about to do. And I'm also so intrigued. And that's like a beautiful moment to share with people.
Yeah, very good. You really captured the emotion of it at that moment. Yes. And so I say, "What's Dafyomi?" He looks at me like that and he says, "Well, Dafyomi means page of the day. And it's a program where people around the world read the entire Talmud on the same schedule. It takes 7.5 years to complete. And today is day one." Day one of a 7.5 year cycle. Now, it would have been amazing if I walked in on month one. It would have been near miraculous if it was week one, but
Yeah.
it was, in fact, day one of a 7.5 year cycle. When God wants to communicate with you, he can be very clear. It was Bashar. It was the language of events, loud and clear. And I said, "Okay, God, I get the message. I'm doing Daf Yomi." And a lot of guys begin Daf Yomi and they have the long beard and the black coat and the black hat. They went to yeshiva and they have smicha. They are rabbis. And they don't finish because it's such a big commitment. It's at least an hour a day, every day for 7.5 years. But I felt like God put the book in my hand. I stayed with it and I completed that journey. It's called Completing Shas in 2012. And then started writing about it, a column in the Jewish Journal. It became a big platform. I'm known as the Accidental Talmudist. My
Yes.
wife and I do it together. We have 1 million followers on
I
Facebook,
have
a
a
few hundred
question.
thousand more.
You got your wife, who is your partner. Did she also read with you?
Not that first time,
Yeah.
but now I teach Daf Yomi every day. My class is Sunday to Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific, Fridays at noon, Saturdays after Shabbos ends. And she's the reluctant Talmudist. She's listening to the whole class. She's fielding questions as they're coming in during the class, and she's digesting and making, sort of like doing a summary of each day's teaching that we post afterward. And so she would say, "I don't have a Talmud head. This is not for me." And yet, maybe against her will, she's learned a huge amount. She's very well versed. And she's got a big sekel, a big intellect, so she's able to handle it.
So, in this whole process, one of the things I ask of leaders is, did you have, and you had many, but is there one teacher, even when you were young, like a young boy, that just showed up for you, that kind of inspired you and heard you and was inspiring you, that even like to this day you think back and think, wow, that teacher really got me and gave me the push that I needed at a time when I didn't know I was a learner. I was, you had Harvard as a North Star, but you still had to get there.
Yes, so her name was Barbara Schreiber. She was my sixth grade teacher, and she recognized that I wasn't challenged in the class. And I could be disruptive, I could be talky, but I wasn't really challenged enough. So she said, I've got something for you." And she pulled me aside and she got me a ninth grade algebra book, and I started learning algebra while I was in sixth grade. Sort of had my own program and my own homework assignments, and I was very challenged, and I enjoyed it, and I was thriving. And then one time, I just my friends were doing something, and I was busy, and I felt like, yeah, I'm 3 years ahead of everyone else. Doesn't matter if I don't do my homework. And I came in the next day, and I say, "Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't do it." And she was so upset, and she let me know that she was upset, and that from people who have an ability and an opportunity, more is expected.
Right.
More is expected than what I had delivered. And I better not disappoint her again. And man, it was message received.
Yeah.
Uh, and so she made me view myself differently than I had viewed myself, and had a forever impact.
It's a beautiful story, and I think that what she also said was, I'm not gonna let you get away with not doing your best."
Oh
And,
yeah.
it's beautiful, and that's a reoccurring thing, and that's one of those parts where I keep thinking about teachers in America, teachers in the world. They are so important and I think so undervalued in so many ways. So that's for me one of these like connections is like I see leaders and they all can come back to a teacher or two, many that were there for them, but one or two that just kicked them in the tush and said, keep going. You're not doing enough. And by the way, I'll say that for more men than women, by the way, that story. So that, you know, and I have a question, but listening to everything, were your parents when you said, "Hey, I'm not gonna go into that business world or be a doctor, but I'm gonna be a creative." Where were they on that? I mean, did they say at that point in your life, "Just go be happy," or did they have some concern, like, "Are you gonna make a living?" Because you talked about that in the beginning.
Oh, did they have a concern? Yes, I lives part of the story. So yeah, the plan was to be a doctor. At Harvard, I couldn't even, keep up and compete with my roommate in those pre-med classes. Now, it did turn out that my roommate was a genius beyond geniuses, but I'm a competitive guy. He was just so much better at those classes than I was. And I was enjoying my English classes. So I switched from being a biochem major to an English major. And but I told my parents, "Oh, I'm still going to medical school. Don't worry, I've done the requirements." And then 6 months later, I said, "You know what? I'm not going to medical school." So obviously, you're going to law school. That was there was no other. And then my father said to me something I heard, and I don't think that he thought I would take him seriously. He said, "Get the law degree. You'll always have that to fall back on. It'll be useful to you in anything that you do. It's very important."
Right.
And I said, "Okay." So I went to law school. I went to NYU. Thank God I was in a very creative place, the Village in New York. Then I had it sort of a double life. I mean, I was a law student by day, poet warrior by night, filling journals, doing spoken readings and poetry readings and performance art and all kinds of stuff. And I got the degree. I actually worked as a lawyer in a big mergers and acquisitions law firm, Skadden Arps, for a year and a half. But I was plotting my escape from the beginning, and it was to go to UCLA Film School. And I really had no business getting in. I wanted, the only film school that wasn't as expensive as the other ones was UCLA's a state school, but it's still high level, and they were taking 18 out of 700 applicants for the MFA directing program. And I didn't have background. I didn't grow up making short films. I wasn't Spielberg making movies in high school. My father was like, "Who do you think you are? You're going to go make movies? What is this business?" And I thought, if it doesn't work out, I'll write novels. He's like, "That's not a plan, Sal. That is not a plan." Um, but I did learn how to interview, how to interview for a job. And I figured if I could get the interview, then I could probably get in. And so I got the interview at UCLA. And then this is advice I give to young people all the time. If you're going to get interviewed for anything, number one, research the person who's going to interview you. This is before the internet. So I went to the Bose Library at NYU, and I learned about the documentarian, the guy who made B movies, and the woman who was making art, like it's fine art films, right? Not art films, like art films for an art gallery, like really esoteric stuff. But I knew about them, and so in the interview, I was able to get them talking about themselves. And when you get people talking about themselves, no one really remembers what's said in an interview. But if they're talking about themselves, they'll remember it was a very intelligent conversation. And thank God it worked. I got in. And as soon as I got to UCLA, I was like, thank you, God, I didn't miss this,
Yeah.
because this is what I was born to do.
Yeah. Well, it's you just gave the I always ask also, what's the advice you give? And your advice was be prepared and show interest, in somebody else besides yourself. Can you tell us, like, what's the best advice you've ever received and perhaps the worst advice you've ever received?
Nina and I once won a screenwriting competition, and we went to the Austin Film Festival as screenwriters, and then we had a wonderful session, just like 10 people, and Lawrence Kasdan, the great writer director. Um, and he said, this is such good advice. Anytime you walk into somebody's office, you are one of two things: a problem or a solution. So if you're coming in there because you want something, you're a problem. But if you have researched that person and figure out what their challenges are and what it is that they're looking for and what they're trying to solve, then you can be a solution. You have a chance to be a solution. You can figure out how to offer them something that they need. So be a solution.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a little bit about working with Nina, and you're married and you're partners and you're creative and you get along. And I know that sounds like a funny statement, but like, how does it work? Because you also couldn't do this without having an incredible person to support you. And at the same time, you are successful together. How does that work?
Separate offices. When we're writing a project, we'll work it out together
Yeah.
through a lot of talking, a lot of conversation. Our biggest fights are about the work because we're very passionate. But we'll really work out the whole story, all the beats of the story, and then we go to our separate offices, and then from then on, it's in writing. So I'll often draft the first draft of something, and then I pass it to her, and she butchers it, marks it up, eviscerates it, and what's right working and what's not, and what it needs, and then it comes back and forth. We're on two sides of a wall in our garage, separate offices. That's the secret.
That's a good one. Yeah. And then also, this is about heart and humanity, this podcast, because what I have learned is that we have a lot of hate in the world. We have a lot of anger in the world. And what I believe is like we also have a lot of heart and humanity, but it gets a little bit silenced by so many loud voices which are angry. But I go back to like your movies, they are about heart and humanity, and they are about human beings. And I have not yet seen Guns and Moses, which I was out of the country and I'm going to see it. But like, when do we eat? I have my Passovers weren't quite like that, but they've been kind of like that. Where like there's just family. There's so much going on, and everybody really just wants to know, when are we going to eat, right? So
Yeah.
like, how does that become? You bring yourselves, but it's about heart and humanity, but it's also about humor. But there's some raw stuff there. There's some real family in that movie, emotions. And is it things you bring in from your lives, you and Nina? Where does it come from?
Yeah, I mean, that movie is not about our family per se, but it's certainly about sort of the greater Jewish family, the greater Jewish tribe. Why do we break a glass at a wedding? To remember our sorrows in the best of times, so that when we're in the worst of times, we'll also remember that this too shall pass.
Mm.
It's very much that roller coaster that we're all on. And that's real. And why do we have such a reservoir, such a tradition of humor? Right? I mean, I've written a joke book, but really I've inherited the jokes. I have adapted all of them. I mean, I made them work for the modern ear and organize them, etc. But it was possible because we're inheriting such a rich tradition.
Mhm.
Why? Why do we have such an important humor tradition? Because we also have so much tragedy. There've been such difficult times in the 3,000 plus year history of the Jews, and we've really, I mean, we've become survivors, right? It's not just that people who survived the Holocaust are the survivors. We're all survivors. Every one of our ancestors had to survive something for us to be here, and often getting through that, before there was the kind of modern medications. So the Jewish medicine was humor.
Yeah.
And non-Jews experienced that too. And our movie about Abraham Lincoln, Saving Lincoln, his sense of humor was so important to him, and really the way that he treated what was probably clinical depression. Um, so it just mattered. Now, it's funny you mentioned When Do We Eat, which is very much a comedy, dysfunctional family comedy, holiday comedy. But that family had baggage. So because it was a family dinner type of movie, we were able to shoot much of it in sequence. Usually when you're making a movie, it's all about when is the cast available, when is the location available, and you're shooting it completely out of order. And that's, one of the challenges that the actor and the director have to face is getting them into that right emotional place, even though today we're at the end of the movie, tomorrow we're at the beginning of the movie, etc. But in that movie, we were able to shoot a lot of it in sequence around that dinner table. And that meant that if there was a 10-minute, darkness around that table, so we, the cast and the crew, were in that darkness for a few days.
Right.
And so there's a part where Jack Klugman, that was his final film role, who was a survivor and is recounting, what he went through, and telling the young Baal Teshuva, newly religious son who's really trying to bring very positive, uplifting messaging into the family. Yeah, don't you think that that's what the Jewish experience is? We suffer, we have suffered, and we survived not because of a Pollyannish positivity. And on the set, being in that darkness for a couple days, they were like, "Are we making a comedy, Sal? Because this doesn't feel like a comedy."
Yeah.
And it was almost like a rebellion against me. It was almost like what was happening on camera was happening behind the camera.
Yeah.
And in the midst of that, after everyone, had their opinions heard, and there's some pretty big stars. I discovered Ben Feldman and Max Greenfield, and we had 2 Oscar nominees, Michael Lerner and Leslie Ann Warren. Really amazing, amazing cast. And after everybody was heard, and they were all Jewish, except for one person, right? And that was Cinda Williams, who is not Jewish and was playing a non-Jew at the table. And she waited for everyone to speak, and then she said, "May I say something?" "Yes, please." She said, "How many of you have acted in garbage? And I mean garbage, crap movies that are totally forgettable, that you were ashamed you were doing it while you were doing it. Uh, this matters. This movie is so important. These highs and lows, the humor, the tragedy, the story, what they're going through, what we're going through right now. We're going through it. We're suffering because it matters." And she was so passionate about it that when she finished, there was nothing left to do but, okay, back to position one. Let's get to work.
And the thing I'll say about When Do We Eat is like it was made almost 20 years ago and it is still pertinent today. It is one of those movies that will stand the test of time because, as you said, and we'll talk in the Jewish tradition, every year we celebrate Passover. Every year we retell the story of Exodus. And the story you tell is about humans and
Yeah.
matters. And I love that story because I think that right now we need to talk about things that matter. And I know in my life in the last 2 years, what has mattered most is being in communication with people
Yeah.
and feeling their strength, not always agreeing. One of the things I talk with Democrats, Republicans, people from big cities, rural, we don't necessarily have to agree on everything. But if we agree on like what really matters, which is heart and humanity and connection, we're going to be okay.
Yeah. I once heard a rabbi say about the political divide in America that it's not even that we have different values. We have the same values. We all value freedom. We all value security. It's how we prioritize them and to what extent we prioritize one over the other. And we suddenly find ourselves at each other's throats and so angry and hating the person who disagrees with me. And really, only the difference is how we prioritize the same values.
So, somebody that I've met in this work that I've been doing as a hostage and a humanitarian advocate, ambassador, since October 7th, when my family was, tragically, my niece and her husband were murdered and their daughter was taken as a hostage. And Abigail was released after 51 days. But I know what it felt like for 51 days to like not have any knowledge if she was going to come out and be alive. And we, to this day, live with the murder of her parents. She did survive, and her brother and sister survived. But one of the things that I have found is like values, and I've met with people so different, but in the end, we share those values. And it's interesting because on certain things we may not agree or we have different, but on that value there is unanimous consensus. And I've gotten so much love and warmth and support One person who we have in common who really was there for me and has been just a hero to me is Mark Fierstein.
Mm.
And, I know he is a lead in Guns and Moses, and I just wanna he's just a very special person, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the movie, but, we share that person, and that is something that I hold very high on my list.
Mark is such a mensch. You're gonna love this movie. If you love Mark, you are gonna love this movie. He gets to do so much and to show so many different sides of himself, and of a rabbi, and of a Jew, and of a man, and of a husband. It's very much a human journey, like you're talking about, and a little bit of my story. He is tasked with defending his community after it's attacked. Guns N' Moses was conceived, written, and shot before October 7th. We knew that Jews under attack who fight back was always going to be relevant, but we never imagined a horror like October 7th, nor this explosion of Jew hatred that has erupted since. Maybe it was there already, and now the people who hate us just feel comfortable saying it out loud, shouting it from the rooftops even. But yeah, it was. I'm an Orthodox Jew now. I wasn't growing up, but when I walk down the street in a kippah or on Shabbos in a black suit and a black hat, we're very conscious to be the visible Jews walking around, and threats to the Jewish people, even in America,
Yeah,
have been rising for quite a long time. I remember my grandmother, right, the Hungarian side of the family that went through that, and she lost her beshert. But her sister and her brothers all survived, which was incredible. Two sisters and two brothers, and they would say, it can happen anywhere. And we nodded and thought, yeah, that was Europe. Nothing like that could happen in America. That could never happen in America. Now, I don't think that we're at a place where we could contemplate something like the Holocaust happening in America. But the danger level to Jews now, here, even in America, is not what it was when we were kids. We never experienced anything like this
yeah,
in our lifetimes. And so I joined an organization in 2019 called Magen Am. It means Shield of the Nation. And we're all volunteers, and we go through extensive training and licensing. We have to pass qualifications that are more difficult than FBI agents. But then we carry a firearm, and we carry a firearm when we go to synagogue. And it's so sad that we've reached such days. But big synagogues can afford armed guards. Orthodox places where there's 100 synagogues in a neighborhood, they're small, they're steebles. They can't afford armed guards. So it's up to us to step up and be accountable. And if we say never again and mean it, then we have to help protect our communities. And then in the same period, there was a shooting in a synagogue in California, Chabad synagogue in Poway. And I went down the next day. I attended Lori Gilbert Kay's funeral. I held Rabbi Goldstein's bandaged hands. He had had his fingers shot off. He was so courageous. He approached the killer who had just murdered one of his congregants and would have killed many more. But after he got his fingers shot off, the gun jammed, and then the guy ran out. And then I watched Rabbi Goldstein become a national figure, calling on people to do mitzvahs, to do something good and righteous in the memory of the murdered, so that something good could come out of that tragedy. We see so much of that since October 7th. But like I said, all of that was before October 7th, and so that was, the genesis of Guns N' Moses was in those events and in the training that I went through.
yeah. One of the things that I will say, I agree with you, and when I speak, wherever I speak internationally in America, and I speak in with Christian audiences, Jewish audiences, and there's always people from the Muslim community at these events because they are with us. And one of the things that I say is that there's truly a lot of people that are with us and support us. The loud voices and the incredible horrific acts of people who are anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist, but really like hateful, anti-human.
Yeah.
There are so many good people, and it's how do we reach those people and how do we build consensus and how do we build community across religions? October 7th, I say this all the time, people were murdered who are Muslim, Jewish, Christian from over 30 nations and people taken hostage also. And what we sometimes fail to understand is that there are so many good people that want to just know the truth and want to be there, but they are there. We have to go out and get to them. And so I think
Yeah.
the things that you can do through your movies and that I try to do in my public speaking about Abigail and the story is to reach people. And it's not going to be on a CNN clip for 2 minutes. It's really about, and this is what I tell people each time, and you started talking about it, which is how to get people to be involved. Go
Yeah.
out and fight for what you believe in.
Yeah. There's no time for sitting on the sidelines now. We all need to be involved. There's many different ways to be involved, whether it's advocacy, whether it's talking, whether it's bringing a meal to somebody who's hungry and needs a meal. There's a lot of loneliness and alienation. In our movie, the murder. There's a murder right at the beginning of a prominent Jewish man, and they find the murder weapon in the trunk of a car owned by a young white nationalist. This is a troubled kid who's really never met a Jew, but he's read stuff online. He's told that Jews are, the cause of all his problems. He made anti-Semitic remarks to the rabbi and his congregation, and that makes him immediately the prime suspect. But the rabbi knows something's not right because when he couldn't get rid of this kid, he walked over to him and offered him a brownie. It's like, I don't want your brownie, and they have a little conversation. And it turns out that the kid thinks that the Holocaust is a hoax. He says, well, let me introduce you to somebody. I don't need to meet anybody. It's a hoax. What is this car your safe space? No, I don't need a safe space. Oh, so come. And he gets the kid out of his car and he hears Christopher Lloyd, who plays a Holocaust survivor, tell his story. And it's not that the kid breaks down and says, oh, I was wrong about everything. But the rabbi sees his face as he takes in that story from a person who experienced it face to face, in person. And it's something shifted. And when he offers him the brownie again, the kid eats it.
Ooh.
And that's not evidence that's going to hold up in court or stop or convince the cops that they've got the wrong guy. But it's enough for the rabbi to know that something else is going on here. And since the cops won't investigate, he does. But that dynamic of breaking bread with people, meeting them face to face, getting to know them, that's how real change happens. And it's, you can't do it through social media alone or maybe at all.
No,
Much more of it is face to face.
yeah,
We need to meet people.
yeah. And sometimes it's just literally in a market line or someplace smiling and saying, "How are you?" or
Yeah.
"Hello." So I'm going to switch 180 degrees because one of the things I want people to know is who you are on things that we can all relate to. So somebody can say, "Oh, this is this amazing director. He's a Talmudist. He's a Orthodox Jew." But at the end of the day, like I go back to like, okay, we have a lot more in common. And my questions are sort of like rapid fun questions. And I asked everybody. So I look forward to hearing your answers. You can give one word or longer. What is your favorite sound?
I can't sing well. If I could, I might have pursued being a rock star. I think that's the ultimate job. But I don't let that stop me. I love singing. I love music. So, I've always been a Grateful Dead fan, and I love being at a Dead show and singing along with everybody. And since I've become a religious Jew, I love our synagogue is known as a Karlbach show, meaning that it's very spirited. A lot of the music is the music of Shlomo Karlbach that we bring into our prayers, and we just sing. We sing together. Something was lost in America when I just told you I love rock and roll, but we grew up listening to it on the radio. And something about Americans is that we know the chorus to 1,000 songs and the verses to like two, three.
Right,
We
exactly.
don't know whole songs, and so in other countries, I saw this in Chile. With when we would go back and visit my family in Chile, and it's like people just get together. They don't get together to watch TV. They don't get together to, listen to something. They get together to be together and chat. And very often they'll just start singing and somebody will bring out a guitar and they know tons of songs. And, in our Orthodox Jewish world, the words of most songs are prayers, so everyone knows the words, and then the melodies, people know them, and so it's just so easy to sing together. And I love that.
That's beautiful. Thank you. This was an easier one. Favorite color?
It's gonna be some kind of a blue, probably like a turquoise. Yeah.
Favorite scent or smell?
Baking bread, challah. My wife's challah on Fridays.
I love it. And I may already know the answer, but who is your biggest cheerleader?
My mom. My mom. I mean, Nina took her place, but my mom of blessed memory, and her yard site is actually on Monday. So I've been thinking a lot about her. I'm going to speak about her when we sponsor the Kiddush this week. But we actually wrote on her stone, uh, "feisty advocate" for her family, and that was my mom, a feisty advocate.
Favorite meal?
I've had the privilege of eating in some really great restaurants in my time, and once we became kosher, the number of restaurants available to us was severely limited. But there's still some wonderful kosher restaurants, and I've had great meals. But at the end of the day, I love a great burger. I love a great burger. I'm very picky. It has to be great meat, cooked exactly the right temperature. And I always tell people when I'm barbecuing, you need to have your bun ready, like already, whatever seasoning, ketchup, mayo, whatever you like, lettuce, tomato, all of that is ready. So I've put your hot burger on that thing. You close it and take that bite immediately. That's a good burger.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And what would you have for dessert? What would be your favorite dessert after that? Because you
Um,
can't have
yeah,
dairy.
I love an apple cake or an apple pie.
Nice.
Uh, with some non-dairy vanilla ice cream if
Yeah.
I've had it after a meat meal.
And what is your favorite book?
Of course, I love the wisdom of our sages and the whole scripture and Talmud and oral history tradition. But when it comes to fiction, I have I'm currently in the middle of my sixth circumnavigation of the Aubrey Maturin novels. Not everyone's familiar with them, but there was a movie, Master and Commander. It's the friendship, the 20-year friendship through the Napoleonic Wars of a British naval captain and his particular friend, the ship's doctor, who's also an intelligence spy. And it's a high seas adventure with the character sensibility of Jane Austen. Incredible books.
I'm interested. So thank you. What is your favorite household chore?
I fix things.
Okay.
They say Jewish men don't fix things. I love fixing things because, especially in our time, we live, there's always a YouTube video that'll teach you how to do it. So I got lots of tools, and I really enjoy figuring out how to make something work again.
And I think again, this one we've kind of talked about, but I ask everybody, what is your superpower?
Probably my sense of humor, in the sense that, I mean, I love laughing. I love making people laugh, but also we've had so many difficulties and frustrations and disappointments. And somehow God bless me that I just don't stay in it. I'm like, well, that sucked. What can we do now? What can we do next? What is there to look forward to?
That's a beautiful mantra way to live. I'm going to put you on the spot before my last question. One of your jokes, give us one of them that in this moment just feels like naturally going to come out. And I know they're numbered and the whole thing, but just one in this day that you think is great to share with everybody.
Well, at an interfaith conference, there's a rabbi and a priest and an imam on a panel, and they're asked, "What would you like people to say about you at your funeral?" So the imam thinks about it and he says, "At my funeral, I hope they'll say, I put the needs of my congregation before my own." And the priest says, "At my funeral, I hope they'll say that I extended my ministry beyond the walls of my church." And the rabbi says, "At my funeral, I hope they'll say, look, he's moving."
Okay. I get that one. Okay, on that one, and this is the part I love. This is my last question, and you've already given me some, which is joy. What does joy mean to you, and how how do you what brings you joy, and how do you share that joy?
I really love enjoying a good meal, with people I care about who all have something to contribute to that conversation.
Yeah.
I think Larry David did a thing on Curb Your Enthusiasm about, some people are middle people, like they can be in the middle of the table. They can carry the conversation. There's other people who are very quiet. You don't want a quiet person in the middle because it'll just kill all the conversation. But we have a round table at our house, and we like everyone to be a contributor, to bring something that is important to them, that they care about, that they're curious about. The only stupid question is the question you didn't ask because you were too shy. There's no such thing as a dumb question because you never know what a question will prompt. And what I love is when, conversation isn't just me waiting my turn to tell the story that's colorful while you tell your story that's colorful, but rather that together we're going to come up with some new idea, some new approach, something that didn't exist before this conversation. That's successful. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And, I want to say first, I like to come to dinner. I would like to invite myself to one of your roundtable dinners, and I'd love to meet.
Yay!
And I just want to say thank you because I truly, I've learned so much. But what I've also been inspired to do is just keep going out and doing more and keep going out and having conversations and keep pushing it, whether it is to bring home hostages, which is something that is still very much in my focus, but it is also to fight anti-Semitism because we all have to be in this together. But
Yeah.
it is really at the end, and you've talked about it in and out throughout this, which is how do we celebrate our humanity, our common humanity, and how do we do that together? And with humor and with the arts and bad singing in the shower, perhaps, but how do we get together and do that? And so you've made me smile and given me a lot to think about. And I really appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing you in person for a real, maybe even more than coffee. And thank you. And good luck to you. Stay safe.
You are invited to our Shabbos dinner next time you're in LA. We can't wait to have you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Liz, and keep up that great work. Somebody who's building bridges and telling the truth and getting people who are on opposite sides of the aisle to speak with each other so they can work together. Your work could not be more important. So I bless you that you should be successful in it beyond even your ample imagination and to 120 and beyond.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Liz. Please join me for coffee to talk about heart and humanity with our elected leaders. Remember to hit subscribe to get an alert when a new episode is live and for exclusive content. Ciao!